Alright, so let's get back to it. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to into the Blackboard site, Analytical Tools for Business Decisions, and under Materials, under Pre-Work, that's the stuff we're doing now, I'm going to go ahead and download the Excel skills file again. You may still have it left over from the last time, but I went ahead and did it now. So I'm going to open that up and enable editing. And this time we're going to go to the Addressing tab, Worksheet. So here, one of the important things is for formulas to be able to distinguish between absolute and relative addressing. So absolute addressing means that once I make a formula and use a cell reference absolute, if I copy it and move it somewhere else, it will stay pointed to that same cell. Relative means if I copy that formula and move it somewhere, it will change. So let's see what we can do here. So what we want to do is we want to put a formula in cell E4 that can be copied to the remaining parts of these blue cells. And in E4, what we want to do is we want to take the column heading here, so in this case 60, add to it, this row 4 heading 60, and add to it column E's heading 10, so it should be 70, and we want to multiply it times 5. Right, so 70 times 5, you can do that in your head, is 350. So that's what we're trying to do. So let's try to do this. So remember, formulas, this is just straight up math. There's no special formula to enter. So we start with an equal. I say 60 plus the 10, E3, times 5. So before I hit enter, take a second and think about what that's going to do. Is it going to be correct? It is not. Why? We said it should have been 350. Because we have order of operations. Remember back from, 5th or 6th grade algebra, 7th grade algebra class, PEMBAS, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, right? So what it did was it took E3 and multiplied times B3, so 10 times 5, 50, and then added it to the 60, gave me 110. So we want to do the addition of the 60 and the 10, D4 and E3 first. So we put that in parentheses. That summation is calculated first, then multiplied times B3. Now we should get 350. All right. Now the question is, if I want to copy this formula down, remember I can use the autofill option here, will it do the right thing? No, we're getting a bunch of zeros. So what happened? Well, when I moved the formula down, it did move it down to the 70, the D5, that's good, but it also moved down to 350 and then moved it down to this blank for the multiplier. So the multiplier, right, is a blank cell, so it's a 0. It counts that as a 0. That's why everything gets calculated as a 0. So how do we fix it? So let's start by, I think the easiest thing to do is to first start with B3, the multiplier. We want that multiplier to always point to that exact cell. The way to do that is to give it absolute referencing. To do that, we need dollar signs in front of the B, right, the column, and 3, the row. On a Windows machine, you just hit F4 one time, and we have dollar signs on both. Right? So that means no matter where I put this formula, if I copy it and paste it somewhere else, it's going to always point to B3. So let's drag it down again and see what happens. Okay, we got different numbers. These still don't look right, but maybe we've moved in the right direction. Let's look at E5. So when I do this, I see that, okay, I did point to B3 up here. This did come down one row, but notice that it also came down one row for the E4. I want it to be pointing to E3 all the time. All right. Another way we can look at the formulas real quick. Here's another great keyboard shortcut. Is Control tilde or Control grave accent. Up in the upper left-hand corner of your keyboard is generally where it's found. And we can see all of the formulas in a worksheet when we do that. right? So we see that D4, D5, so that part's staying correct, but this is coming down to E3, E4, E5 is coming down when we don't want it to. The B3 is pointing always back to B3, which is what we want. All right, so hit Control tilde to get back. Let's try modifying this again. So we want it to always stay, the E3 to always stay in row 3 when I copy it down, right? So if I hit F4, it'll always stay to 10, right? That would work if I'm only copying down. To prove it, let's go ahead and copy it down. So that is working, right? It should be going up by, right, we're adding 10 each time and then multiplying by 5, so it should be going up by 50 each time. That does work, but what happens when I try to move this to the right? It does not work, right? So our goal, remember, I'm going to hit Control Z one time to undo, is to be able to put a formula in cell E4 and copy it across the entire blue cells. So if I look at these formulas now, it anchored it completely absolute to E3. All right, I want it to only be on the row so that when I drag it to the right, it does it. So then I need to come back into this formula. On E3, notice where my cursor is, it's right there. If I hit F4 one more time, it's saying what? It's anchoring row 3, right? Is that what I want? I think it is, so let's try it. Let's do that. And that stayed the same, right? And now if I drag it this way, is it going to do what I want it to do? Oh, we're still not doing something quite right. So let's look at this formula and see what happened. What happened was, now I am going over to column F for that second part of the formula, but when I moved right, it went away from column D to column E. So then what happened over here? It went to column F, right? All right, so we should be able to fix this, right? All we had to do now is worry about column D. So I want it to stay in column D. So I want the $ in front of the column letter. So if I hit F4 one time, that's absolute, both column and row. Hit it one more time, that's just row. Hit F4 one more time, and now it's just the column. So now let's try copying this down. Okay, we're getting the 50s as we expect. We drag it over. Is it doing what I expect it to do? 60 plus 20 is 80 times 5 is 400. All right, so I'm adding, as I go across, I'm adding 50 each time. And it looks like if I click in on a couple of these, it looks like it's doing the right thing. So in order to do cell referencing, we should think about whether we want the column anchored, the row anchored, or both of them anchored, or none of them anchored. Right? So here I can do have sums out in the yellow, so we might as well go ahead and put the sums in. One quick tip you can do is Alt plus. It'll try to add up all the sums next to each other. The problem with that is, notice it took that row header of 60. So I just need to, I can drag it over or change it to E4. Right? And if I add that guy up all the way down, all right, here I can do the same thing, Alt plus, but again, it tries to grab onto him. And then if I drag this guy over, does it work? Yes. Right? All right, so that is absolute referencing and mixed referencing and relative we started with, and we saw that it didn't work in this particular case. So you should practice a lot with that, especially as we get into bigger spreadsheets.